And I'm, whoa, very loud. I'm Robert Bloom.
And you may have noticed your paying close attention that this session was originally supposed to be given by someone named Jason Judge. And Jason is our boss. And Jason had a family emergency, so we stepped in to give his talk for him.
I think that your mic is not
Not on?
Try it again.
Turned off. There we go. All right. So we sat down at the end of last week and chatted with him about his presentation. His presentation was really great, but it was his story. And I don't know if you've ever tried to tell someone else's story, but it's a little hard. One of the things that Jason was working on was a series of data discovery for you to use in your organization to help build a case for your BI program. He had a lot of really great resources around surveys and interview questions, but we didn't feel comfortable talking to it. So we are going to post all of that material up with the slide deck. We wanted to let you know about the resources that he put a lot of time putting together. So those are up there if you want them. We thought instead we would share a bunch of stories from our experience in the BI industry and specifically working at Tableau. So Robert and I are on the enterprise analytics team at Tableau. That is the team that does Tableau at Tableau.
I love that phrase.
Yes. So we thought we would start by talking a little bit about Tableau. And then we have some sort of takeaways about how you can use this information to put together a stronger case for your own BI program. So you guys all game with that today? Okay, awesome. So these are our 8 core values at Tableau. We're on a mission. Our mission is pretty incredible. We keep it simple. We work as a team. Hopefully we're epitomizing that here today. We're honest. We respect each other. And the biggest one is we use our own products.
That's so core to Tableau. There is literally not a single part of Tableau that doesn't use our product in some way, shape, or form.
So on one hand, that presents huge opportunity. So we have over 1,000 creators. If you're not used to our new sort of naming conventions, creators are desktop users with a little bit more superpowers. They get prep. They can publish to Tableau server. And then we have about 3,500 explorers in the company. Those are people who have access to data sources. They can create visualizations through the browser, through web edit, and save those to a project. And then we have about 500 viewers. And our viewers are mostly contractors or they're service accounts that we use for big TV displays that we have that show data through our company, and also some of our embedding service credentials as well. So they're not going in there and editing anything. They're not saving anything. We have 3 server deployments, one in the US, one in UK, and one outside Singapore. We also have 2 online sites that we use. So our entire development team actually runs their whole business on Tableau Online. And this was a decision we made because in part of using our own products is we want to put them through the rigors that all of you will put them through first. We want to feel that pain. So our dev team said, you know, we have a little bit of progress to make on Tableau Online. They said this about 18 months ago. And they said, we're going to move our business onto Tableau Online and use it every day. So our dev leadership team, Francois, who you met, and Andrew Beers, who you met, they get to feel those bugs first before they ever go out to you guys. And then we use it also for our technical operations team because we've had a big initiative to move to the cloud. So within our IT team, they're also using Tableau Online as well. And then finally, we have about 350 customer-facing online sites. So sites that are managed by an employee at Tableau, but a customer of ours, one of you maybe, might have credentials too and can access data about your deployment. So we have a program called Elite Support. They keep changing the name, but through our support team, and they provide regular data updates about deployment and deployment review. So we use Tableau Online that way. So we live under the CFO in technical operations, and we treat Tableau just like any other enterprise application at Tableau. About 2 years ago, we had gotten some feedback that our data pipelines to our Tableau server were stale, and it was hard to get data in them. And so we made a strategic effort to take our team that was managing Tableau server and combine that with the team that runs our data pipeline for our company. So this is sort of the result of our team. We have data architecture, data engineering. We have DBAs, which is where Robert got his start. Program management, where I got my start. And we have admins as well. What you'll notice up here is we don't have any analysts on our team. All of our analysts live in the business, and we support them. It's a very decentralized approach to analytics. And there are plus sides and downsides of that, and we're going to talk about that more in a little bit. But we did want to sort of tell you where we're coming from as we talk about this. So these are our different analytics teams that are embedded in the business. We have our sales side, we have marketing, we have development. They're doing a lot of information about testing, a lot of information about data coming out of the product around usage. And then we have our operational teams. And all of these teams have analysts, and they're all at different stages of their Tableau journey. The new one that I would say we're this close to adding is legal. You wouldn't think that the lawyers would want to use Tableau, but they've actually been using it a lot for risk analysis lately. And our Keenan, I just forgot his title. Counsel. They've been making a big effort to integrate Tableau in there, and they're just on the verge of hiring an actual analyst into that team. So that's really, really exciting. So all of our teams are sort of at different journeys. I would probably say our sales ops and our marketing teams are the most advanced of all of them. Yeah. So we get Tableau for free. It's really cool.
Great deal on the license.
Yeah, really, really great deal. But that doesn't mean that we don't have to go out and get funding, right? Part of the BI program is there's a lot more than just the Tableau server, right? We have to have ETL processes, we have to have data warehouses, we have to have programmatic support for end users. We have to have hardware to pay to put Tableau server onto. And so I wanted to say that we also feel your own pain about getting BI programs approved. It's not just all.
I don't think that's coming from us. I don't
Sorry,
know what
I thought
that
I
is.
was like rustling and making noise. All right, so it's not all a rosy picture. We don't get everything we ask for either. Do you want to talk a little bit about the projects that we've had the last 18 months?
Yeah, the projects that we've got up here, a lot of them have been projects that me and my team have actually worked on. The data pipeline as a service is one of the biggest things that we started on, I would say about 6 months ago. I had a slide in one of my other presentations, but I didn't have time to put it in this. We have probably every programming language on the planet being used to move data from A to B, and that's just not scalable. You know, we've inherited so many pipelines from so many different teams, every single team that Ashley had up there a second ago, and we've had to manage them for a while. We're going to talk about one of them in one of our stories. So we're really focusing on trying to centralize that into one reusable metadata configurable pipeline to get the kind of scale that we need to run our business. A couple of these other ones are things that you might be familiar with if you work with like marketing or sales. A lead conversion data model is something that every company struggles with, and that was one of the projects that I worked on I believe that was last year. The same for the remodeling the sales data source. That had grown very organically and, again, not scaling, so we needed to focus on that. Each one of these are generally around that vein, is that we've grown pretty quickly as a company, and a lot of the things that grew organically just weren't ready to support us anymore. And I'm sure that all of you have faced something like that, at least somewhere in your company. I think that we've got a list of some of the other things that we're coming up on.
So these are things we want to do.
Yeah.
We're in some sort of phase of getting approval, getting funding for it. So these are the things that are on our roadmap for our team. biggest thing I think that we're excited about is the object model. I don't know if you guys all followed what happened with Tyler and the vision, but the object model is really going to unlock the ability to have what today could be 5, 10 different published data sources at different granularity levels, and have it in one data source. And that to us is just amazing from an overhead perspective, right? There's far less that we're going to have to manage if we can combine those into data sources. So that's actually probably the one that we're most excited about. And then we're also really excited about extensibility with applications. So that's a big project we're going to take on this year, having more of our applications talk to each other. And then finally, one of the things that we've realized in our team is actually there's not enough training within Tableau itself about how to use Tableau. So Jason, who was supposed to lead this talk and has kindly provided you with all of these surveys, went out and actually did a survey of the company. And the answer we got back from our employees about the #1 reason why they weren't fully utilizing the resources our team was providing for them was they didn't feel confident enough in using Tableau. So we're about to jump forward with a big initiative company-wide to get more of our employees into training itself. So we'll talk a little bit more about that one at the end.
I think our first one is going to be coming up in December is when we're starting that one. Yeah.
So a little bit about us. So one of the biggest changes we made this last year, I didn't realize that was fully animated. I'm just going to put it up there so you can all look at it. Is we went from an ETL process to an ELT process. And this has been really, really huge for us as a company. And what it allows us to do is allow an end user based on their skills to actually connect in at any level of our pipeline and not be dependent upon our team to be able to access the data they need. So historically, we were, Adam was talking this morning about how it can be really hard to receive that criticism and that feedback that's negative. And about 2 years ago, 3 years ago, we sort of got honest with ourselves that we weren't actually that great with data in the company. We're great at using Tableau, and people had really worked hard to use the product successfully, but we weren't getting them the access to the data they needed fast enough. They needed a new field added to a data source, and it would take weeks at best, and they really just couldn't rely on our team. Our team was not dependable to be able to get them the data they needed. So we sort of flipped things on its head. We said we're going to take all of the data out of our applications and we are going to store it in its raw form in S3. And we're going to give users the ability to connect to it there if they want. We are also going to do ETL,
Transform processes?
Just a transform process, I guess. And load it into different data warehouses we have throughout the company. We do not use one data warehouse exclusively at Tableau. We have about 6 to 8 different official data warehouses in the company. And that's because each team really has different unique needs. So one of the things we do is we try to support the teams and how best we can support them and not try to force a solution on top of them. So we're going to talk a little bit about our Redshift and Snowflake instances in a little bit. And then we have curated tables within those, within our SQL servers so that end users can connect to data that has business logic around it. And we've really been working over the last year to take what were these views and tables that had everything sort of pre-computed for our end users and actually break those down. So I want to show you a little bit about what that looks like. Oh, wait, I got to go further. I'm going to skip ahead a couple slides. I'll come back to this. So this is our sales opportunity data source. It's one of our most used data sources in the entire company. It has something like 14 joins needed for an end user to get to the accurate answer. And about 2 years ago, remember I told you that no one had confidence in our data? That was because every person in the company had to do the joins themselves. And so everyone ended up with different numbers, and they came to meetings with different numbers. And then our poor salespeople at the end of the quarter would be like, but my dashboard said I was going to make my number. What happened, right? And that's like the last thing that you want happening in a sales organization. And so we have enabled our end user to just access this with one click on our Tableau server. So there's our sales opportunity data source up at the top. It currently has about 1 million views on it. So it's pretty heavily used. And this has sort of become the gold standard. And in creating this gold standard, we were able to work with our development team on the new certification features to make sure that this was something that we could put a little mark next to it and say, yes, this is certified. So we were really excited when the dev team finally released that feature. One of the things about sales opportunity, I think I was having a conversation with a customer yesterday, and he was saying, how do you get people bought in to sort of using it? And I think the first thing we talked about is you have to let people know that it is available. And I know that sort of sounds counterintuitive, but if you're doing work today, you really need to let people know that that work that you're doing is there and available to them. So we put in a little bit of development effort to actually build a portal into our 6 most used data sources. We actually did a query out of our SQL Server at the time to see what tables were being used the most in our company. And we decided to prioritize the 6 sets of tables that were being used the most often. We realized that we could have the biggest reach and the biggest impact and the biggest sort of bang for our buck and increasing confidence if we prioritize these 6 sets of tables. And so sales opportunity, activities, assets, those are all data sources that came out of this project. So we built these data sources, and then we built a portal that allowed someone to come in, and pretty simple portal in that it had the data sources listed out. It had examples. It had information on what the different categories meant, the different fields meant, the different measures meant, how they were calculated, and then it gave them a link to create a new workbook from the data source. And what happened was there are now, we're creeping up towards 900 workbooks that our sales team, account managers, people in technical support, they have created for their own use. And this sort of, what's the word I want to use?
Not sure.
It was sort of a organic growth that happened. So what would happen is a salesperson would create a really great dashboard, and they would go to their QBR and they would present. And then their peers would be like, oh, that's really cool, can I use that? And so one of the features that we talked with them about really heavily was custom views in Tableau Server. Who's familiar with custom views? Anyone? I think custom views are the best thing. So custom views allow you to preset your filters on a dashboard. So if you have a dashboard that you use regularly, say a dashboard that allows you to filter down to a given set of territories, you can set your default view to be a specific set of filters. So every time that you access Tableau Server, your end users are actually able to use those custom views the first time it loads as default. They're also able to subscribe to those custom views so that they can end up in their email box every morning and sort of have that more self-service report. So those are some of the things that have allowed us to sort of change how our BI program, the confidence level in our BI program within our own company. Anything that you want to add?
Just that each one of these changes was small. None of them really was a huge thing that we did or a huge effort, but you add them all together and it all adds up to a lot of scale. Just like the little certified data source thing, that's just a little green mark, but it gives people so much more confidence in the data that they're working with because it means that an expert has looked at it, validated it, and yes, these numbers should be correct. I think that you add all those together and it really adds up to something big.
All right. So we're going to sort of change a little bit and talk about the sort of phases of the process of getting a BI program approved. So the first is sort of designing what you want. The second is the planning phases of, hey, this is what it's going to take to actually build it out. putting together your presentation and presenting it, executing on whatever gets approved, and then evangelizing your success. So the first thing we think is you should do exactly what we do. It's supposed to be a joke. Actually, there are many right ways. I have a stepdaughter, and we were at curriculum night with her 9th grade English teacher. And her English teacher said, you know, we used to say there's no wrong way to do it. And there are actually wrong ways to do it. But there are many right ways to do it. And we've really tried to embrace that within our team. And as we talk to customers, there are actually many right ways to do this. There's not one correct way to build a BI program. And I think that's something that you need to sort of realize for yourself is you're probably here and you've probably heard a lot of customers talk about what they do. You've heard us talk about what they do. That may not be perfect for you. Just because they had success with it doesn't necessarily mean you will have success with it. So take the elements of everything that you're hearing and combine them together to create the program that is right for you.
And this is true at every level of designing the BI program, from the very top of what are the architectural choices that we want to make, and all the way down to the little choices that the dev team is going to make while they're implementing it. There's no one right way to slice every single problem.
Our next one is craft a comprehensive solution. Make sure your BI program covers all employees and all of their needs, and put together a giant big proposal. Now, this is also a joke, right? So, what we'd say is automate strategically, and be strategic about what you're going to do and where you're going to start. So one of the things that we have really taken to heart in our team is, yeah, there's a lot of really great ways to do things, and there's really shiny ways of doing those things, and those things are great. But one of the rules that we live by is do it by hand until it makes sense to automate. Don't invest your time and money up front on a solution that you think is just going to be perfect without sort of doing a phased out, tested approach. And so sometimes putting in that hard work of doing it by hand the first couple times will give you a lot of lessons about how how you're going to want your end solution to actually look. So you have a really great story from this about your team, right?
I have a lot of really great stories about this on my team. As a Scrum Master, that's my role in the data engineering team. The desire to craft the comprehensive solution up front, that's something that a lot of people higher up in the organization will want to do. It's also something that the dev team is going to want to do. They're going to want to sit down and plan out absolutely everything before they sit down and actually start coding the solution that they're going to make. We mentioned one of the projects that we're working on, that metadata-driven pipeline, and we're trying to treat that less as just another ETL and more as a piece of software that can enable people in our company to actually work with the ETL pipelines themselves. But we're not, as a team, we're not really used to thinking of things like that. We're a team of data engineers. So this was just last week, actually. We were sitting down in a room doing our Sprint Zero, our quarterly planning, and we had a lot of trouble getting past some of the, oh, well, okay, wait, we're going to do this, so that means we need to back all the way up and write our entire security model before we start with anything, and oh, wait, if we're going to do that, then we need to decide everything about the web stack before we figure out how we're going to present this UI. We don't even know if people are going to want to use this yet. So starting off, and what is the biggest bang for our buck that we can get that we can show somebody right now?
So one of the things that we use to achieve this is we call it using an MVP. So the minimum viable product that will get the job done. So one of the things that we found really helpful is to bring that scope down to say, hey, what actually will get the job done? It may not be the prettiest thing. It may not work the fastest. But hey, in the first round, for us to get something out the door that will be helpful, what is the basics that are needed? And this has really allowed us to not put the cart before the horse, in essence, to figure out, hey, would someone actually use this before we invest a lot of time? One of the big lessons for us is in this transformation from ETL to ELT, we knew that we wanted to use one ETL language for this. So we went out, we selected a vendor, we were very excited, we created this whole roadmap, this whole delivery plan for how it was gonna happen. And we started using the tool, and we realized, you know what, this isn't gonna work for us. And when you have invested a lot of time and energy and money in something, it's actually really hard for our brains. We sort of have this bias in our brains to step back from it. And so by selecting a minimum viable product for putting the most simple thing out there we could that would get the job done, at the end of that, we were able to take a step back and say, look, we did invest some time, but what we got out of this was learnings. And that was the value of all of the work that we did. And we were able to actually go out and select a different vendor. And we've had a significant amount of success with them, with the second vendor, because of that.
Yeah.
So I have 2 examples of how we automate strategically within our company that I thought you might appreciate. So this is actually a little bit outdated now that we announced webhooks, which are so exciting. Something that we've been talking with the extensibility team for a while. And so where webhooks comes from is this application that we wrote internally to notify end users every time an extract fails. So, you know, we were talking earlier about how we just weren't seen as dependable, right? If the data source is stale on the server, people are just not going to use it. So we needed a way to notify the data source owner if their extract had failed. And in the beginning, it was sort of a tedious process. We built a dashboard, we published it to Tableau server, we would look at it every day and email the user. Well, we had enough extract failures, normally for benign reasons, but they needed to be addressed, that, you know, our server admin was spending huge chunks of his day emailing data source owners. And so what we did was we dug into the data, and we actually created a notification system that allows an email to go out to the end user. Hey, your extract has failed. Hey, this is the error message. And my favorite part is the suggested action on the bottom. So ensure you're using the correct password and that your password has not expired. And we actually saw this a lot when they put new password rules into effect in our company. We actually had a lot of data sources that broke. There's also links down at the bottom to view the affected data source and to view the entire extract history. And this was something that allowed us to automate this process and offload it from our server admins onto end users who really did care about getting their data updated timely. The second one is my favorite. It's called You've Got Stale Content. And what it means is that something on their server, we call our server ALPO, by the way. It stands for Activity Leads Pipeline and Opportunities, but it also is the name of dog food, so our team likes puns. He's the master of puns over there.
None of them are good. None of them are good.
And so we call our Tableau server ALPO, and we have an anagram of that, OPAL, for our data warehouse, to keep them apart, because for a long time our data warehouse was also named ALPO, and so people would get really confused. There's a problem with the data on ALPO. Does that mean the data warehouse? Does that mean the Tableau server? So I would recommend naming them separate things.
The guy who sent this email would strongly recommend this.
But what we do is we have sandbox projects on our Tableau server. And we give users a lot of freedom to put workbooks on there, to put data sources on there within these sandbox projects. And that means that we actually get a lot of workbooks and data sources on our server. And over a 30-day period, we actually have about 3,500 workbooks added to our server. And so the amount of data on our server was growing and growing and growing. And we were like, well, do we add more hardware behind it? How do we solve this problem? And we went and we looked at the data, because we're a data company. And one of the things we saw was we had a significant number of workbooks that hadn't been touched in a very long time. And they had data sources behind them that were being updated even every 15 minutes. So we would have a workbook that hadn't been looked at for 3 or 4 months that was taking up precious backgrounder tasks because that extract underneath it was just running in the background, right? And so what we did was instead we instituted a couple rules. The first is we created an actual archive project, meaning if you wanted to keep that content on the server for a while, we're going to create a project for you to go ahead and move that workbook to. But if it's in that folder, you have to disable your refreshes. So all of those workbooks stay there indefinitely, and they stay there with the data that they have in them when they're moved. And so then our stale process cleanup skips over those archived projects. Instead, it just looks at our official projects, and it looks at our sandbox projects. And what it does is it looks at time, and it looks how many times that view has been loaded in the last 180 days. And if that number is 0, it sends an email to the owner, and it says, hey, you've got stale content, and you're also an awesome person. We love you. But we're really not liking your stale content. So what we're going to do is if you do nothing, we are going to archive your workbook and pull it off the server and store it on a network drive. So all of that work you did, it's still accessible. If you call us up because you've been on vacation, out on maternity leave, something you realize way down the line that you need it, it's sitting out there on our network folder. But we're just going to go ahead and remove it for now. And so what we do is we provide a link, and we say, if you want to keep it, all you have to do is click the link. It's super simple for them. They click the link, it loads as one view now in the server, and it restarts the clock for 180 days on that workbook. So that's one of the things that we've done to automate our content cleanup so that we can continue to provide a large environment. So we currently have about 8,000 workbooks on our main Tableau server here in the United States. 3,500 workbooks get added on a rolling 30-day basis, and then every month we're running this cleanup process and we're taking content off. And so what that allows us to do is it allows us to save on hardware, it allows us to save on time, and it allows a very painless process for our end users. So again, key to that is quick and easy for them to take action on, and a backup method that if for some reason they really do need it in the end, they have it. So we actually use tab command. It's a server API to go in and actually pull those workbooks down. And that happens in a completely automated process. Our team, I don't even think we really think about it anymore.
We haven't touched it since we launched it. It's just been working in the background, saving Jeff, good friend of mine, hours and hours a day.
So this came out of that idea. This is something we did manually for a while. It got so painful for us to do. It was just burdensome for us to do that we decided to automate that task. And that's really how we have built out our BI program, is sort of one of these chunks at a time. So you may have noticed a pattern that we are doing a conventional wisdom followed by the modern BI way. So we're going to sort of continue with these strokes because I think they're fun. So ask for what you think you need is actually identifying what you really need. Do you have a story?
Do you want to go with the Redshift story?
Sure.
Yeah. We had a program that we kind of started to build out. We really started and we dove in just kind of at the beginning. We thought, okay, well, there's a lot of data in the company. We're not scaling with how we manage the data. Got it. We're going to give everybody a Redshift sandbox. We're going to give everyone a budget to manage that sandbox, and it'll all be golden. Oh, wait, we're going to need people to manage that too. We started off thinking about how could we solve the problem, and didn't start by asking, what do we actually need to solve this problem? That led us down a difficult path, and we really did have to take a step back and say, okay, what do we need to solve this? What do we need to ask for up front to get the resources to solve this, to be successful in enabling people to deal with all the disparate data that they had across the company?
So we had heard from users throughout the company that they just needed somewhere to put the data. And so we thought we had a really good solution. And we layered on Alteryx to that. And some people really took off with that. But at the end, it really didn't get to the heart of the problem they had. So this is a dashboard that looks at call data within our company. Our sales team for a long time have been asking, hey, we really, really want access to this data. We really want to be able to use it as a coaching tool to make sure that people are having long enough conversations with their customer, that they're actually having the number of conversations they're saying they're having with customers, and we just want to use it as a coaching double check measure. And so we were like, yeah, sure, no problem. We can totally do that for you. Turns out it wasn't quite that simple. It turns out that we actually needed somewhere to put that data. Turns out we needed a reoccurring process for pulling that data down. It turns out that the data, when it came out of Splunk from a Splunk search that we had co-opted from another team within the company, really wasn't structured for how the sales team needed it. And HR had needs around data security, that it required building an entire data model. So when our VP of IT came to me and said, hey, is this something you can do? I was like, yeah, that's something we can have done in a week. It took us almost a year to deliver it. And it took us a year because we thought that we could sort of be startup-y and sort of say that, yeah, we can get this done and just a lot of hard work. But the reality was we didn't really sit back and look at what was needed to solve it. And what was needed to solve it was a sandbox in our data warehouse where we managed the pipeline for that data. In reality, the team itself just could not manage that pipeline of data. And when we got real with the sales team about what it would take, we actually found that budget materialized to make it happen. And so being very clear about what was needed to be successful allowed us in the end to be successful and build a case for something that's now allowing a lot of different teams within our company to have similar successes. All right. So conventional wisdom, don't ask for too much. Instead, identify realistic options. So I think sometimes we have this fear that if we ask for too much, the ratio with the return on investment won't be right, and so we don't ask for those things we need. We didn't ask for that data warehouse sandbox for that team. In reality, what we should have done is we should have said, you know what, look, there is option A, there is option B, and there is option C. And it's actually amazing, the human brain will always, when you have three options, want to default to the middle option. It's sort of like Goldilocks. We don't want the chair that's too hard. We don't want the chair that's too soft. We want the one that's just right. And so actually by putting a slightly higher end option, a little bit more expensive option, one that's maybe a little bit larger in scope, people are actually more likely to choose the second option, that just right fit. So you can sort of use that strategically as you're putting together your proposals and your asks. You can say, look, if at this dollar, with this head count, with this technology, we can do X. And that is our ROI. And then that's sort of the, like, we're going to be scrappy about it. We're going to sort of be, in Seattle, Amazon's sort of known as the scrappy company. Like, they make do with what they have. So you can sort of do that Amazon way, to sort of bootstrap it together. And that's great. But then ask for what you really need. And then that third option, ask for that large ask. And say, look, if we really want to do this right, if we really want to hit it out of the park with this, this is what it will take. And make sure that all three of those are actually realistic and doable. Like, don't actually give them that really, really scrappy option because you might get stuck doing it. So make sure that they are realistic. A really great option for that is actually data from our HR team. So every year we do, this is a sample data set behind our comp review dashboard. So once a year we go through and we actually do a comp review of all employees to make sure that everyone that's within the same title and location is falling nearer within the band. We did this with our sales team recently, and we saw that there were actually quite a few people that were falling in the low part of the band. And so that manager was strategically able to use his budget and sort of uplift people into the band. So this data set comes from Workday. And Workday is a little bit more challenging to get data out of. And so for a long time, that first option was, you know what, we're going to download the report out of Workday, and we're going to connect Tableau to that Excel file, and we're going to just manually upload those dashboards. And that's what we're going to do. It's okay. We're going to manually go into Workday, download the file to a network drive, and have Tableau pick it up on the refresh. And that was the scrappy option. And then there's a second option, which is we're going to use Alteryx to go pick up that file and do more ETL on top of it and combine that data together, and that will actually give us a better picture. The third option is to actually pull that data into our data warehouse so that we have snapshot in time data, and so that we can do a more comprehensive analysis. So initially, that team chose to go with option 1, and we supported that option. And then they said, you know what, we've outgrown this dashboard. We want to do option 2. And we said, all right, we'll work with you. Help us find that budget, and we can make it happen, but this is what it will take. And the third option is they've now come back to us, and we're actually working on getting that data into our data warehouse. And so we didn't promise the moon on the low budget. We said, look, this is realistic for what we're able to devote to it. Kylie Anderson built this dashboard. She has a talk right after this on HR at Tableau. So if you're interested in our HR data, if you're interested, really good talk to go to. Just going to plug it in here. All right, so we're going to sort of switch over. Now that you've sort of identified what you need, you've put together the cost estimate, it's time to go present. So conventional wisdom is to exhibit comprehensive information, when in actuality, you need to just demonstrate that you can be trusted. I know this is a big shift. I know when we go into meetings, I know when I go into meetings with our own executives, I want to look smart and I want to look busy. And I feel this need to tell them about all of the work we did to get to the number, or the entire process that we went to get to this conclusion. Or I want to sound like I know about the technology. And so I know that I have to pull back sometimes, and I have to say, actually, you know what? That's not what our executives care about. Our executives want me to be an attorney, and they want me to be a consultant. And by that, I mean they want to be able to make sure that I have the company's back, that I have their back, that I what's the word I'm looking for? Yeah, so I have this fiduciary responsibility to the company, and I have the company's back, right? I've got all of the risk in hand. I understand the problems. I can see the bigger pictures. I can see where Adam Grant said it really well when he had the example this morning about bringing all of the executives together and asking them to kill the company. Do you guys remember this example this morning? And this is spot on. Where are our vulnerabilities? Where are our weaknesses? And being upfront and honest about where those weaknesses might be actually show you to be trustworthy. Showing that you have it completely in hand, that this is the perfect solution, makes you come off as overconfident. It makes it come off that you can't be trusted. At the end of the day, what your executives want is to know that you know your stuff, that you have their back, and they can trust you to lead your team to be successful on what you've promised them. And so that's really the message that you need to be giving, not peppering with little details. And by giving that stronger message, you will establish trust, and you will be able to build your program in time. So, conventional wisdom. At the end of the meeting, the executive speaks up and says, hey, I don't think you quite have your headcount numbers right for the number of employees you need to support. It's really quick to be able to jump to your own defense, right? This is an innate response that we all have. Instead, A, know your data really well, but B, help them come to a different conclusion. So the question you want to then steer towards instead is, I think he's not necessarily asking, hey, is your headcount number wrong? What instead he's asking is your program set up to be successful if the headcount number is bigger, right? And so being able to tap in and have a more honest conversation with them and helping to get to a different conclusion instead of getting defensive, taking a step back, that can be really helpful. So,
I think for me, like the word that's most important there is them, is helping them come to it. And that's another thing that I come to a lot working with the dev team. The metaphor that I like for it is actually the movie Inception, because it's actually just one of my favorite movies. The real idea in that they used a lot was that an idea that somebody else gives you doesn't stick. And that's what happens when you're correcting their misconceptions. You're just telling them this is the idea you should have. But if you can give them the data and let them come to the better conclusion, then it'll be much more of a sticky idea with them, and they're much more likely to act on it.
So I recently had this where I put together like the best proposal for how we were going to train our employees. Like, it was brilliant. It was color-coded. There were charts and graphs. It was amazing. And I baked the idea myself. And it got questioned. And I got defensive. And stepping back from that experience, I realized two things. The first was sometimes you need to allow them to be a part of the conversation about what is needed and what you are crafting, because then they will actually themselves be invested in it. It's really easy to say no to someone else's idea. It's really easy to say yes to something that you've been a part of crafting. That's idea one.
No.
Second is I went to a company training recently, and it's actually the best company training I've ever been to. And my big takeaway was this: opposition becomes conflict when it gets personal. If someone says something critical about the proposal that you put together, just like I did, it's really easy to take that personally. Their questioning isn't because I didn't do a good job. It's because they want to work together to get us to a better place. And so if I can step back and realize that their critique or my manager's feedback after the fact about how the meeting went isn't to be taken personally, I can actually step back and be a little bit more open to what they have to say. So anytime I feel myself getting defensive, I need to realize that I need to take a step back and say, hey, what in this caused me to take it personally, and hey, could they have meant it in a way that wasn't personal? All right. So we're going to skip into the executing phase, because once you get that approval, you need to go ahead and execute. So we always like to deliver a finished project. I know I'm a perfectionist at heart. I want it to be like perfect when it goes out the door. But the reality is that we should seek feedback early and often. This allows people to get invested in the work that you're doing. It allows you to identify opportunities early on for changes that are needed before you invest all of that work.
Yeah, I'm not allowed to be a perfectionist in my job. My goal is to teach people this kind of core concept of agile development, is that if you do kind of like Ashley's story of putting together an entire proposal and having everything color-coded, that part I actually do like. If you do that and you come to trying to build the entire thing up front without seeking that feedback, you're probably not going to deliver what they actually wanted in the end. You're going to bring your own misconceptions in, and you might go down the wrong path for a long time without ever finding out that that's where you're going. We have a couple of stories that have ended in that, but I think that we are running a little bit long.
So I'm going to run through the last three quickly. Leads us to deliver it in phases. So we use a strategy called now, next, later in our team. It means we get very clear on the now, what we are doing now. And we have a list of the things that are up prioritize to tackle next. And then we have our wish list of later. And we really try to break this into phases and say, hey, what is in this current phase now? That may be a 2-week sprint in some of our teams. My team works on more of a quarterly cadence. We work more on sort of quarterly engagement with our business. And so my phases tend to be more quarterly. So it really can be at any level of time that you want. Finally, instead of focusing just on the positives, celebrating successes and failures. Failures really are a learning opportunity. Failures don't necessarily matter when you care about delivering the best thing, because failures allow you to get there. And it's just as important to celebrate those successes. Teams that are working hard on delivering, find those small wins, celebrate them together as a team, and champion those successes. One of the things I really like to do is I call them my elevator pitches. So I have little antidotes in my back head, so when I run into an executive in the hallway and they're like, oh, how are things going? I can be like, oh, I just had this great meeting with Jill, and her team has been able to use that new data source that we were working on with call data to achieve Y. And so I have those little nuggets tucked into my back pocket because those help build trust.
I'll say something about celebrating the failures, an idea that I love. But when I first presented it to one of my teams, it got a lot of pushback. Why would we want to celebrate failures? Wouldn't that incite people to fail? The idea behind celebrating failures is celebrating that even though what you tried didn't work, you definitely learned something. And that learning will drive you towards a better product in the end.
All right. And then our last one is, don't just report on outputs, measure your impact. And so we really set out early on in our planning about, hey, how are we actually going to measure and see if this is successful? So as we're going through these phases, we can actually identify, is this thing working or not? So I do have something to leave you with before you go out the door. This is what we use to measure engagement with our Tableau server. It's a dashboard. I get it every morning. I look at it over coffee. It doesn't normally look like this. But this little trend down here, this is our daily view. One of the things we've seen you can sort of see it over in the corner there on the last 30 days. You see this low spike? Hardly anyone's using the Tableau server while we're all here at conference. So I just thought I would point that out. So the Tableau server actually has a whole repository of data in it. It's a lot of tables. And they're really, really messy. This is the joins required. Go ahead, take a picture so you can recreate it. These are the joins required to get to that dashboard we were just looking at. So instead, we have 4 data sources that we use. We call them Tableau server content, events, background tasks, and data connections. And we are in the process of betaing a user data source right now. The wonderful thing is we have put these up on the community, and they are downloadable. So you can download these data sources and some corresponding workbooks that go with them, and just publish those right up to your Tableau server, and then you can get these reports as well. So you can really monitor your engagement. And these data sources actually drive those content cleanup processes and what's the other one? Error messages that we talked about. So if your company wants to do that, these are the data sources you use for that. There's also information on the community about how to do that. So search shareable data sources for Tableau server on the community page, and they will come up.
I think that's everything.
I do think that is everything. Oh, I was going to put the slide up. So I thought we would write some calculations for you. I maybe needed some aggregation in there, like some sums and averages.
Yeah, no, you're definitely putting an aggregate measure with a discrete. That's not going to work.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us today. We'll make sure that this PowerPoint deck gets up along with the original PowerPoint deck, so you can go take a look at that, along with the surveys that Jason had put together. Make sure you take a look at them. They're really brilliant. And have a great rest of the conference. We'll hang up here.